Maple Creek was the kind of town where nothing ever happened. Tucked away from the chaos of the city, it was a place where everyone knew each other's names, and the biggest news was usually about the annual bake sale or a high school football game. Life moved at a gentle pace, and the townsfolk took comfort in the predictability of their routines. That is, until one ordinary Tuesday morning, when $7 million vanished without a trace from an armored truck making its usual rounds. The event sent shockwaves through the community, shattering the illusion of safety that had always defined Maple Creek. The truck was discovered abandoned on the outskirts of town, its heavy doors flung wide open. Inside, the cash was gone. Every last bill. Even more unsettling, the driver, Mark Fletcher, had disappeared as well. For a town unaccustomed to crime, it was as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. Within hours, police launched a massive manhunt, combing the countryside and questioning anyone who might have seen something unusual. News crews from across the state descended on Maple Creek, turning the quiet streets into a media circus. The story dominated headlines, and the town's name was suddenly known far beyond its borders. The heist was executed with baffling precision. Forensic teams scoured the scene, but there were no fingerprints, no footprints, and no security footage to follow. Whoever planned this robbery had thought of everything, leaving investigators with nothing but questions. Mark Fletcher, the missing driver, was no stranger to the people of Maple Creek. He was a devoted husband and father, known for his kindness and reliability. Overnight, he went from being a trusted neighbor to the prime suspect in a crime that seemed impossible. Was Mark a victim, taken against his will, or was he the mastermind behind the most daring heist the town had ever seen? Theories swirled, and speculation ran rampant, dividing friends and neighbors. The Fletcher family, once respected and beloved, suddenly found themselves under a relentless spotlight. Reporters camped outside their home, and whispers followed them everywhere. The pressure was unbearable, and the community's trust began to fracture. Investigators searched for any sign of a struggle, but the truck was pristine. No broken glass, no forced locks, and no evidence of violence. The only clue was a disabled GPS deliberately tampered with, and the haunting absence of Mark Fletcher. The case quickly became a puzzle, with too many missing pieces. Every lead seemed to end in a dead end, and every theory raised more questions than answers. The town was left grasping for explanations, desperate to make sense of the unthinkable. But beneath the surface, secrets festered. The truth was more complex and more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Clues were hiding in plain sight, overlooked by even the most seasoned detectives. And at the heart of it all, the person most devastated by the crime, the one everyone thought they knew best, was hiding the biggest secret of all, a secret that would change Maple Creek forever. Mark and Sarah Fletcher seemed to have the perfect life. A cozy house, 2 kids, and a reputation for kindness. Mark was a reliable employee, Sarah a beloved PTA mom. Their days were filled with barbecues, soccer games, and quiet evenings. No one ever saw them argue or suspected trouble. Friends remembered them as the ideal neighbors, helpful, friendly, unremarkable in the best way. The idea that their happy home could hide a dark secret was unthinkable, but beneath the surface, something else was brewing. Hidden from friends and family, a story of desperation and ambition was unfolding. Their perfect life was a carefully constructed illusion, and the final act, a devastating betrayal, was about to begin. The town had no idea what was coming. Sarah Fletcher, to everyone who knew her, was the picture of a devoted wife. Quiet, supportive, and always present at Mark's side, she played her role flawlessly, blending into the background of their suburban life, never drawing suspicion. But beneath her calm exterior, Sarah's mind was always racing, calculating her next move. She had grown tired of the monotony, the endless cycle of routine, and the feeling of being invisible in her own home. Late at night, while Mark slept, Sarah would sit alone at the kitchen table, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. She began to imagine a new life, one where she was in control, free from the constraints of her marriage and the expectations of her neighbors. The idea of escape became an obsession, and soon she was secretly plotting every detail. The $7 million Mark was transporting for his job became her ticket out of suburbia. It was more than just money. It was the key to her freedom. A chance to reinvent herself far away from the life she'd come to resent. She could almost taste the possibility of starting over, somewhere no one knew her name. Sarah began to gather information from Mark, listening carefully to his stories about work, asking innocent questions about his roots and the security measures in place. She paid close attention to every detail, learning about the truck's vulnerabilities and the routines that could be exploited. Mark, trusting and unsuspecting, never realized he was giving her the blueprint for his own downfall. To Mark, these conversations were just another sign of Sarah's interest in his life. He felt lucky to have a wife who cared, never suspecting that her curiosity was anything but genuine. He had no idea that every word he shared was being carefully catalogued and used against him. In secret, Sarah created fake identities, researching notorious heists and the best ways to disappear without a trace. She set up offshore accounts, learned how to cover her digital tracks, and even practiced forging signatures. Her preparations were meticulous. She left nothing to chance. She planted evidence throughout their home, subtly making Mark look guilty. She altered search histories, hid a second duffel bag filled with cash, and even left behind stories about people faking their own disappearances. Every piece of evidence was carefully chosen to point the finger at Mark if things went wrong. Every move Sarah made was calculated, every detail designed to frame her husband and ensure her own escape. She rehearsed her story, practiced her alibis, and made sure there were no loose ends. She wasn't just planning a robbery, she was crafting an elaborate narrative, one where Mark would be cast as the villain and she would vanish without a trace. In her journal, she mapped out every step, pinning newspaper clippings and photographs to the wall like a true mastermind. The real architect of deception was hiding in plain sight, orchestrating every step with precision. Sarah moved through the world unnoticed, blending into crowds, always watching, always planning. No one suspected a thing. To everyone else, she was just another face in the crowd. But behind her calm smile was a mind always 2 steps ahead, ready to disappear the moment her plan was set in motion. On the day of the heist, Sarah's plan went into motion. She built an airtight alibi, calls, errands, social media posts. Meanwhile, she orchestrated the heist remotely, using a burner phone to divert security and sending her cousin to intercept Mark. Mark, threatened with harm to his family, complied and left the truck as instructed. The money was transferred to a van, the truck abandoned and all evidence destroyed. Sarah played the distraught wife flawlessly when police arrived. She painted Mark as a loving husband, never hinting at her own involvement. The deception was perfect. Sympathy for her, suspicion for Mark. The stage was set for the perfect frame. Sarah subtly steered suspicion toward Mark. She mentioned his recent stress and planted doubts about his behavior. Police found the second duffel bag, fake travel plans, and incriminating internet searches, all planted by Sarah. She'd even created a fake bank account in Mark's name, making it look like he was preparing to run. The evidence was overwhelming, and the public turned on Mark. Sarah became the tragic victim, giving tearful interviews while knowing she'd orchestrated it all. Mark was branded a villain. Sarah, the grieving wife. The frame was flawless. Maple Creek was torn apart by the scandal. Most believed Mark was guilty, shunning his family and fueling gossip. Mark's parents and children suffered, isolated and judged. Sarah managed the family's isolation, playing the role of the wounded spouse, but a few loyal friends doubted the official story, pointing out inconsistencies. They couldn't believe Mark was capable of such a crime. The police, convinced of Mark's guilt, stopped looking elsewhere. The town's certainty blinded them to the real culprit. No one suspected the truth was hiding behind Sarah's mask of sorrow. For nearly a year, Sarah's crime went undetected. She lived quietly, careful not to draw attention, but a speeding ticket hundreds of miles away, near her cousin's hometown, raised questions. Mark's supporters hired private investigator Frank Miller, who ignored the evidence against Mark and focused on the crime's sophistication. Frank found Sarah's library visits and searches for offshore banking and GPS jammers. The speeding ticket led him to her cousin, who had a sudden influx of cash. Frank started asking questions and the cracks in Sarah's story widened. The perfect crime was starting to unravel. The evidence was mounting, and suspicion was shifting. The truth was finally within reach. Frank Miller brought his findings to the police who, after much hesitation and internal debate, reluctantly agreed to reopen the case. The evidence he presented was compelling enough to force their hand, even though many on the force believed the case was long dead. The reopening sent ripples through the department, reigniting old suspicions and bringing a sense of urgency back to a mystery that had haunted the town for years. A new detective, eager to prove himself, took a special interest in the case. He pored over every detail, determined to find what others had missed. Soon Sarah, who had once been seen as a victim, became a person of interest. The shift in focus was subtle at first, but it quickly became clear that the investigation was closing in on her. Digging deeper, investigators uncovered financial records that raised even more questions. They discovered that Sarah's cousin, previously overlooked, had received a suspiciously large deposit shortly after the heist. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence, and the money trail began to paint a picture of conspiracy and betrayal. Surveillance operations were ramped up, and a routine traffic stop turned out to be a turning point. Officers found a burner phone hidden in the car, its contents filled with incriminating messages that linked Sarah and her cousin directly to the planning and execution of the crime. The evidence was mounting, and the case against them grew stronger by the day. Sarah's carefully constructed alibi began to unravel when detectives analyzed the metadata on her social media posts. What appeared to be a live update from a distant location was, in fact, a staged post, edited and scheduled to mislead investigators. The digital footprint she left behind became the very thing that exposed her deception. Under mounting pressure, and faced with overwhelming evidence, Sarah's cousin finally broke down. In a tense interrogation, he confessed to his role in the crime, revealing every detail of the plan in exchange for a lighter sentence. His confession was the final piece of the puzzle, confirming suspicions and exposing the full extent of the scheme. The web of lies that had protected Sarah for so long finally unraveled. Police moved in swiftly, arresting her at her home. The woman who had once been the subject of sympathy was now at the center of a scandal that rocked the entire community. News of the arrest spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the small town. Residents gathered outside the courthouse, whispering in disbelief as the real story emerged. The community, which had rallied around Sarah, now struggled to come to terms with the truth. The woman they had pitied and defended was now being led away in handcuffs. Her face splashed across every news outlet. Cameras captured every moment, and the town watched in stunned silence as the reality of her actions became undeniable. The truth, when it finally came out, was more shocking than the crime itself. The betrayal cut deep, leaving the town to question how well they really knew those around them. All along, the real mastermind had been hiding in plain sight, blending in with the crowd, her true nature masked by an ordinary life. The unraveling of her story would haunt the town for years to come. With Sarah's arrest, the search for Mark ended. He'd been held captive by her cousin, believing his family was in danger. The trial revealed Sarah's chilling plan, and her cousin's testimony sealed her fate. She was found guilty of robbery, kidnapping, and framing her husband, sentenced to 40 years. Mark was freed, but deeply scarred by the ordeal. He left Maple Creek with his children, seeking a fresh start. The town, ashamed of its rush to judgment, tried to make amends. Most of the stolen money was recovered. Maple Creek returned to quiet, forever changed by the secrets behind its white picket fences. Justice was served, but the cost was immense.